Just Fear short stories by Joseph Martin. Desolate Dare, story number 2 from his collection.
Dear readers, do not miss the end. Desolate Dare, Chapter 1, The Ominous Eavesdropping, page 1. Salim was bitten on his neck last week. Uncle Chandra was on his mobile. The grimness in his voice chilled me rather than the words. I froze. I could not move on without hearing his further conversation. So I crept towards the slightly ajar door and listened. I'm not a nose poker, but today I could not help being one. We are an average family. Not orthodox nor too liberal, and my uncle was a no-nonsense guy. He would never take my interference lightly. Though I was nearing 20, he still treated me like a 12-year-old. The old coot did not know I had already gone through a dozen of hookahs, cigarettes, even tequila and weed. And there was also Gignasha, a.k.a. Gina, my GF, a year senior to me. She was no Kim Kardashian, but definitely a hottie. Nobody called her Gignasha, it was too pedestrian. Just as everyone called me Andy. In school, I was known as Anda, Egghead. Not now, though. Chapter 1, page 2. But who could tell him? He would never understand. The old school of thought. If he even got the slightest clue, he'd kick ass hard. But his further talk caused bloody goosebumps. Salim had gone to the Tahali Kandar and now he is dead. Uncle continued. Girish too had accompanied him. He is lucky to be alive, but is suffering from bouts of fright fevers. Girish is my village childhood friend. Something in the Tahali Kandar had terrified him. He developed fever due to acute fear. Tahali Kandar was a ruin in my village. It was rumored to be the haunt of an ancient Chudale, witch and her horde of bloodthirsty Narpashak, ghouls. Could this be the cause? Could they have bitten Salim? No, I told myself. I was letting my imagination run amok. It was absurd to even think this pure crap. Some rabid wild animal probably bit Salim. But how? Who? My village was a remote island cut off from the mainland, and the British had wiped off most of the predators decades ago, as they had planned to build a secret naval base that never materialized.
Chapter 1, page 3. I did not have time for such bullshit. My haughty angel was waiting for me, but what followed next was chilling. The poor boy's trembling after dark, night after night, was pitiful. This lasted for nearly a week. By the end of the week, he died. Salim, trembling in fear, dead, unbelievable. He was a true daredevil and had guts of steel. Once he had ventured into the mangroves beside the Tahali Kandar in the dead of night, to prove there were no ghouls. And now, those very non-existent ghouls had tried to devour him. As I stood listening, I heard footsteps behind me. It was time to move away. But the last sentence convinced me. Again, Uncle was speaking. I am going to organize volunteers from the village and venture into the Tahali Kandar to find their lair and eliminate them. We have endured them for too long. I hurried away before I could be caught. Uncle Chandra is my foster uncle. My dad, Arjun Gaikwad, and he, as kids, were inseparable. When I was a year old, Dad and Uncle had gone on a trek into Tahali Kandar. Chapter 1, page 4. A fatal accident there injured Uncle and brought Dad a slow death. This is all I got to know. Chandra. The old coot always tactfully evaded the issue. Why? Also, on certain days Chandra would be uptight, especially on my birthdays. Why the hell? Was he hiding skeletons in his cupboard? Anyway, Dad knew his end was imminent, so he instructed his lawyer, Yush, to declare Chandra the custodian of our village property until I turned 21. Really wonder why this didn't happen on my 18th birthday. But who could question the old coot? Uncle brought me to his city house when I was 7, where I lived to date. These days, Uncle seemed relieved on 2 counts. First, I would be going to the village after 10-odd years. Also, my property would be transferred on my name. I would turn 21 next month. My property, he declared, was a heavy burden. My foot. Uncle's words lurked in my mind. I went to my room and pondered over the hush-hush telephonic conversation. Chandra was going to the witch's lair? To kill the vampires? Shucks, too shitty stuff. Such witch and werewolf hunts were only in movies. Chapter 1. Page 5. A mob of villagers would assemble with fire torches, pitchforks, scythes, swords, and whatnot to hunt these evil creatures. I could not get the thought out of my head. I have a thing for ruins, historical places, and the occult. It is the only thing that separated me from my friends. Desolate Dare. Chapter 2. To Holly Condor's gory past. Later that day, I found Uncle reading a newspaper in his favorite chair. "Uncle, what time are we leaving for Velugar tomorrow?" I inquired, to strike a conversation. I detested going to the village. That horrible well water for drinking, no air condition, eating and drinking from steel vessels. Ugh! It was worse than a labor camp. But I had to receive my inheritance. It amounted to a fat 7-digit figure. Without putting down the newspaper, he answered casually, "Not we. I will be leaving tomorrow, as I have to attend to some urgent matter before you reach the village. You can join me later." Our good old village, I said, trying to sound pleased. My friends, especially Gina, had drilled it in me to pretend that I was pleased to go. Uncle would be happy, she reasoned. Chapter 2. Page 6. I shall meet Girish again. I added on second thoughts deliberately to rake up Girish's story. The telephonic conversation was always on my mind. By the way, how is he? I probed further. Uncle now put down the paper. Without batting an eyelid, he answered, "Okay, what a load of crap Chandru was giving me." "And Salim?" I persisted. At these words, he looked straight at me. In a low voice, he said, "Okay." I was adamant, so I asked, "Uncle, tell me why so glum? Upset about something?" "Okay, fine," he sighed. "If you must know, I just got a call from Yush, your lawyer, that your property papers are missing. None can claim authority over your property until it's found. Not even you. No property." My face fell. He immediately said, "Relax, boy. It's just a matter of days, and everything will be okay." I felt the lump in my throat dissolve. I was back to my interrogation. "Uncle, at least tell me now, what happened on that fateful night at the Kandar?" Chapter 2. Page 7. He glared at me, gritted his teeth, and thundered, "Anish Gaikwad, you meddlesome swine. You want to poke your nose everywhere. How many times have I told you not to ask about it?" With these words, he stormed out of the room. His outburst was justified. Maybe he felt responsible for Dad's death. Besides, people, knowing Chandru's risky nature, blamed him for the accident. I strongly felt that the mishaps of Dad, Girish, and Salim were linked to some mystery in the Kandar, unknown to me. Without even saying a bloody goodbye, he left for the village the next day. Good riddance. Who cares? A few days before Durga Puja, I left for my village. Gina and a few friends came to see me off. They tugged at my traditional kurta, passing down market comments. Bitches. I have never dressed traditionally, but always in branded clothes. I was forced to dress so, for these idiotic villagers stared, as if you had landed from Pluto. Gina often told me that she was attracted to my matte demonish looks. She was not the first girl to say so.
Chapter 2, Page 8. The bus ride from Pune to Velugar was a 5-hour journey. The AC bus was comfy, but the popular Bollywood movie playing was boring, at least to me. It was supposed to be hilarious. All my fellow commuters were laughing uncontrollably. But hard as I tried, I could barely get a smile from the movie. I wish they had played a real Hollywood classic, something like Inception, Bourne Ultimatum, or maybe even Matrix Reloaded. But I am sure my half-brained fellow commuters would be like cavemen watching an automobile. Irritated, I got out my BlackBerry. It had been my piece for the last 6 months. I now yearned for an iPhone 4, but Uncle would have nothing to do with it. I promised myself, with my inheritance, I would buy the best piece in the market. Probably an iPhone 4S from Apple. It had an A5 chip that made it twice faster than the iPhone 4 and also a dual core with several times better graphics. But for now, I put on my earplugs and listen to sexy Rihanna sing. Cheers, drink to that. Chapter 2, page 9. Soon listening to it made me thirsty. I got out my pineapple Bacardi and made short work of it. My village, Veliger, is a small fishing village on the Konkan coast, close to the state of Goa. In fact, it was a part of Goa until the state of Maharashtra came into existence. I had heard some place that I come from a royal lineage. My great-great-grandfather was a Jagirdar, a kind of small regional prince, and his estate included the entire village of present-day Veliger, while old Chandru's lineage came from foot soldiers of my estate. Tahali Kandar is an ancient ruin on the far side of our village. It was one of the many lesser-known sea forts built by the Marathas as early as the 18th century. Later, it was taken over by the cities. Around 1840, the British conquered it, and it remained in their possession until independence. Chapter 2, page 10. It had a gory and infamous history. The fort had witnessed a lot of bloodshed during the 1857 revolt. Hundreds of Indians were killed. Their corpses were thrown in the sea adjoining the fort to rot. Thereafter, the villagers claimed to have seen the spirits of the slaughtered ones. I seriously believed all of it was crap. All forts witness bloodshed. Of course they have to. They are built for offense and defense. So, does it mean all forts are haunted? What about those forts which are well-maintained and visited by tourists? Why are such forts not haunted by spirits and ghosts? Tahali was a Kandar, ruins, because the Indian Archaeological Society had ignored it, or probably was clueless of its existence. The bus crossed into Veliger, and though it was 4 in the evening, it appeared dark. Rain clouds loomed over the village. It was really crappy weather. When would I finish with this godforsaken place? Soon our bus passed by Tahali Kandar. A strange excitement filled me. The place bore a dark, desolate look. What really existed in the damn place? Chapter 3. Desolate Dare. The Witch Lady. Page 11. The bus drove through the village and entered the depot. I stepped off the bus with a kind of trepidation. Old Coot's 22-year-old son, Vishy, and their servant, Mohan, the schmuck, had come to receive me. I was a pro at nicknaming others, and boy, I excelled in it. Loony Vishy was a nerdy guy. He was tall, scrawny, and wore tacky clothes. He wore his hair like a jerk and was ever aloof. Saying a quick hi and bye, he left the place hurriedly. Vishy had always been like this. He never interacted with me. Uncle had probably sent him to learn some panache from me. He was not a bit like Uncle. I seriously wonder if he is really Junior Chandru or a bastard. A stupid foot soldier indeed. Mohan was a schmuck, a guy about my age. He had a retarded look about him. He was dark, short, and his hair was like twisted pieces of wire, like the Aborigines of Australia. His favorite topics were spirits and witches. Besides, he was to be my man Friday for the next few days, so it was necessary to be polite. That meant you kiddity yak with him. Chapter 3, page 12. The schmuck told me that Loony Vishy had always been a recluse. He was uninterested in worldly affairs, which was a pain in the arse to his father. Uncle was busy with the village festive preparations. Aunt was busy at home. It did not matter. I had Tahali Kandar on my mind. Just as my luggage was unloaded, the skies opened in torrents. Crap, it was just the luck I needed. We took shelter in the depot and chatted. But I had certain questions on my mind, and Schmucky was the best to answer them. I asked him, "How are Girish and Salim?" "Fine. Anish Baba," he answered. Anish Baba? How low society it sounded. But what else can you expect from a schmuck? I did not care a crap what he called me. I just wanted my property, sell it, and boogie out of this village of a shithole. Are you sure? I persisted. Yes, Anish Baba. Only I haven't seen them for a while. Chapter 3, page 13. Why were they all lying? Bloody liars. I soon veered the conversation to Tahali Kandar. I wanted to know everything about that damn place. Mohan, I knew, had a penchant for it. So, I decided to milk him some more about the place. Once again, I asked, "Are you sure there is nothing about Girish, Salim, and the Kandars?" He grew solemn and said, "Yeah, they were attacked by the Chudale, and now they have become vampires." I stared open-mouthed at him. My heart did a double flip. Was it possible? For a moment, I did not move. What the fuck? The stupid look on my face was too much for him. He burst out laughing uncontrollably. I grew red-faced and glowered at him. Just then, I noticed an old hag staring at me. She locked me with a steady, wild look, which was unnerving. I looked away, but moments later my sights were back on her. Her wild, steady look had not left me. Chapter 3, page 14. She appeared to be poor. Time and poverty had aged her. Her face was bony. Her hair was salt and pepper-colored. But what stood out in her bony face were her stoic eyes. They were sinister, snake's eyes, and hadn't left me. She was not a person to encounter on a dark night. I was getting spooked. Mohan must have noticed it, for he turned to where my sight was. Anish Baba, he whispered urgently. Don't look at her. She is evil. She is Maltabai, the witch. Everyone believes she is mad, but she is a worshipper of witches. My gaze could not shift from her. It hypnotized me. Mohan grasped my arm and turned me around. Anish Baba, we have to go. Lifting my luggage, he guided me through the depot. What were you doing, Baba? He scolded me. You can easily fall prey to that witch. She always roams near the Dahali Kandar. Never, ever look or speak to her. Come, let's go. The rain has lessened. As I reached the depot's end, I could not help looking back. She was still staring at me. Suddenly, she raised a bony finger and beckoned me to her. The hair on my neck stood. I turned away and followed Mohan as quickly as I could. What other weirdos were in wait for me? Chapter 4. Desolate Dare. The Unholy Visit. Page 15. Tonight, I somehow sensed it would be an unsavory night. Mohan's warning was the all that reverberated in my ears. Anish Baba, please close the windows at night. Yet, I had ignored his warning and left the window open. I hated to be told what I should do and what not. But as it grew late, an uncanny feeling that I was being watched hung over me like a dark shadow. Outside, the silence was overpowering. There was the constant sound of crickets and the occasional croaking of frogs. Far in the distance, the breaking of the ocean's surf was audible. Occasionally, a gentle wind lifted the window curtain, exposing the darkness outside. The saline sea smell was strong. I could not sleep till I met Uncle. He was working late. I was all eager to know about my inheritance. Had the old man found the missing papers? If not, then what would be my fate? The niggling thought that the trusted lawyer, Yush, was up to old tricks did occur. But my uncle had always advocated for him. He wouldn't stoop to this level. Chapter 4, page 15. I put on my BlackBerry, but it was to no avail. The thought that I was being watched was nagging me. I arose from my cot and looked out of the window. My room was on the ground floor. It opened out to the countryside. Outside, the night was silent. A fine mist was blowing in from the sea. Not far from my window was a small lake. On its bank stood an enormous banyan tree. Mohan had told me it was the village swimming pool. Aha! But a few months earlier, a young couple had committed suicide in it. Since then, it was alleged that the place was haunted by the couple. Villagers avoided the place after noontime and sunset. Yet, for some unknown reason, I watched the eerie scenario. The banyan tree stood there with its scraggy branches spreading out in all directions. A shallow blanket of mist hung over the inky black waters at its foot. It made the hair on my neck stand. Anyone with proper sense would shut the windows and cocoon themselves inside. But I was just too much bullheaded to do so. I wondered what I was trying to prove. And to whom? Yet I stood before the window and willed the dead couple to show themselves. Chapter 4, page 16. My vigil was broken by a knocking on my door. Who is it? I asked. It's me, Anish Baba. I heard the schmuck call. I hurried to open the door, relieved to be distracted from my eerie vigil. Mohan had brought a mosquito repellent. Baba, is everything all right? He asked, glancing at me. Everything's fine. I lied to him, accepting the ointment. His inquisitive eyes did a quick recce of my room. It stopped at the open windows. Anish Baba, you are brave to keep the windows open. I wasn't sure if it was genuine admiration, or was he being cheeky. Brushing me aside, he entered. Such intrusion would make me explode, but tonight even the schmuck was welcome. Yet my temperament kicked in. Don't close the windows, I ordered, as he stretched out to close them. He stopped and turned around. Just for a moment, I detected a flicker of triumph on his face, and then he was back to his childish protesting. Anish Baba, did not I warn you of the dead couple? Mohan, I interrupted firmly. There are no ghosts. All this is bull crap. Chapter 4, page 17. He looked at me as if I was a dunce. I knew I had stepped on a raw nerve. He was a staunch believer in the supernatural. Anything against it, he was sure to pick up cudgels. It was the only way to stall him. I wanted him to keep me company. The night was getting eerier by the minute. He settled below the window on a mat facing me. I sat on a low charpoy. He was back to his favorite topic, the occult. Anything to humor him and keep me company in this infernal silence. One night, 2 villagers were returning home, Mohan began. While passing the Tahali Kandar, they saw a beautiful maiden. She was weeping. They stopped to help her. She told them she had lost her son inside the Kandar and could not find him. She requested them to help her find him. What a bucket load of crap. I knew the rest of the story. One of them noticed something abnormal about her feet. They were twisted backwards. Ghosts are supposed to have twisted feet. But I let him continue the story. It was amusing. He finished the story and sat in silence, waiting for my reaction. Chapter 4, page 18. When he got none, he spoke in a hurt voice. I know you don't believe me. But I am telling you, Anish Baba, there are witches and ghouls in the Kandar. I lay on my charpoy, trying not to dwell on the story. But my sight kept going to the curtained window opposite me. A gentle breeze blew the curtain slightly. For a second, at a glance, I saw a pair of eyes watching me. Then they were gone. I stiffened. Was it my imagination, or was I being watched? I kept silent. I didn't want to end up as a schmuck before the schmuck. I lay back again, this time, my eyes fixed on the window. I waited for the breeze to shift the curtain. It did, but no eyes stared from beyond. I did not know whether I felt relief or fear. Yet my eyes stayed at the window. What the bloody hell? Anish Baba, Mohan said. What if I take you to a man who actually knows a witch? I was not hearing him. My sight was on the window. Goose pimples erupted all over my skin. The pair of eyes appeared outside the window. Chapter 4, page 19. They stayed long enough for me to realize I was not imagining. Then it disappeared. It was exactly like the one I had seen at the bus depot. I could not forget those terrible eyes in a hurry. Damn witch. Mohan, I think someone is outside the window. I whispered from the corner of my mouth. The transformation of Mohan was a sight to see. He turned pale, and his jaw hung in disbelief. Suddenly, he lunged away from the window to my side. I knew I could not count on him. I was alone. Who the fuck is there? I called. Only a mild breeze and silence greeted me. I arose and moved towards the window. Please, Anish Baba, he literally begged. Don't talk to them. Don't even look at them. Screw you. I wanted to tell him, but I saw this as my chance to show bravado. Damn, whatever it was outside. Besides, the window was iron-barred. Mustering all my courage, I moved closer and called again. Come out whoever you are, or I will screw you so bad. You will not want to come back. Again, silence. I grew confident. Was it a burglar just doing a recce of the place? Had I frightened him? Chapter 4, page 20. Kudos Anish, I congratulated myself. I turned and saw Mohan sitting huddled, staring at the window. Feebly, he pointed towards it. I turned. The pair of eyes were again at the window. Before I could think of anything, an arm thrust in and tried to grab me. What the fayak? I yelled as I stumbled backwards, falling on Mohan. We watched in horror as the arm withdrew and a voice called from outside. My, somebody is certainly jumpy. Uncle Chandra, I called with a deep sense of relief. The curtain was drawn aside. I saw the laughing face of Uncle. You scared us to death. I complained. My relief was turning to anger. I was ready to kick Chandra's keister. You deserve it. Don't you have anything else but spirits and Tahali Kandar? He reprimanded me. I have been standing here for the last few minutes to surprise you, and all I hear is that rubbish. So, I wanted to show you every occurrence has a valid explanation. That wasn't funny. I was fuming when he entered the room. You care a damn? Anish, this is the last time I will repeat myself. There are no witches, vampires, or evil spirits. Do you understand? And no more talk of the Tahali Kandar. One death, and he abruptly stopped. Chapter 4, page 21. Why was Uncle so fucking determined to keep me away from the Tahali Kandar? But Uncle, one death, I repeated, trying to corner him. But what, Anish? Are you a retard or just stupid? I don't want any discussion on this matter. Now go to sleep. Tomorrow I have a long day. With that, he strode out of the room. Trust Uncle to quickly change the topic. Before he could step out, the curtain shifted slightly. A pair of coal-lined eyes was watching me. That damned witch woman, Maltabai. Crap bitch. A cry erupted from my throat. Uncle was back in a jiffy. He and Mohan were looking wildly at me. What is it? Uncle asked. There, I pointed towards the window. Someone is there. Uncle rushed to the window and pulled aside the curtain. He looked around for a few moments. See no one, he declared. I quickly rushed to the window, just in time to see a blur of a white sari disappear around the corner. The witch. She was vamoosing. I looked at Uncle in bewilderment. Surely he could not have missed her. Uncle looked blankly back at me. With an accusing gaze, I looked at him. But he avoided it, turning to Mohan and reprimanding him. Without another word, he left the room. It was unlikely of him. Chapter 4, page 22. Screw Uncle. I ran out, rounded the building, and reached outside my room. I looked around and found nothing amiss. The woman was nowhere to be seen. The darkness and silence looked back at me. The corpse had given a slip to King Vikram. I was puzzled. What was he trying to hide? If there were really no witches or vampires, then what had bitten Salim? Which lair were they talking about? What was he going to decimate there? Something was fishy, definitely. I had to find out. That night, I slept fitfully. Chapter 5, Desolate Dare, The Witch Lady Again, page 23. The next day, I spent chatting with Uncle. He seemed determined to spend the day with me. Neither of us raked up the night's drama. My opportunity arrived when Uncle got ready to leave after lunch. I, as usual, began to rib Mohan about the previous night and his beliefs. But the witch woman's face at the window kept coming to my mind. Anish Baba, if you really want to see vampires and witches, wander in the Kandar after sunset, he challenged. You dare to? Sneery schmuck. He was daring my cojones. Chapter 5, page 24. Mohan was busy with his work, but he still had an eye on me. This was his chance to get even. I was in a dilemma. Either accept the challenge and go against Uncle or refuse it and be branded a fatu, a coward. I looked to see if he was joking. He must have seen the fear and uncertainty on my face, for he teased, "It is easy to be here and brag. But going in the Kandar needs gochya, balls of steel." His words took me by surprise. The schmuck was growing wings. So I would do a Girish and enter the Kandar. Chandru's words instantly came to me. There are no witches. Salim was bitten on his neck and feet last week. He was warned often not to go in the Tahali Kandar, but now it has caused him his death, and no more talk of the Tahali Kandar. One death there is enough. Such conflicting thoughts came to me. Mohan's words really stung me. I could not back off from a challenge, and that too from a retard. Besides, silence would be taken as cowardice. To hell with everything, I was not letting the schmuck squeeze my balls. Okay, schmuck, I will go to the Kandar, I said with bravado. Chapter 5, page 25. It was his turn to grow silent, hearing the unexpected. A moment later he said, on one condition, go after sunset. Tie this red cord tightly round the trunk of the banyan tree in center of the Kandar. In a flash, he handed me a long cord. Bloody schmuck. He was doing everything to make it tough. I could not back off now from whatever he was throwing at me. I swore I would get even with him. To Tahali Kandar go I must, but first things first. At 4:15 p.m., I was knocking Girish's door. His old man opened the door and instantly recognized me. How have you been, Anish? He inquired. Perfecto. How is Girish doing? Giri is doing fine. He is not there right now, he said rather reluctantly. Okay, I'll come later. I have a lot of catching up to do. I understand. Bye. I'll ask him to call you, he promised and hastily shut the door on my face. Bastard. Thanks to my sharp ears, I heard a voice inquire, "Who is that, Papa?" Instantly, I recognized it. Girish. Why, that lying old coot. Salim had come, but I said you were sleeping. I heard his old man lie. Chapter 5, page 26. To say I was puzzled would be an understatement. It was like being in the catacombs without a light. I stood listening, waiting for some interesting tidbits of conversation, but the sound grew muffled. I pledged to myself that I would solve this mystery today, come what may. Just then, I saw a pair of coal-lined eyes watching me. This time she was standing under a tree, staring at me, her eyes intense as ever. Once again, she beckoned me with her finger. My first instinct was to flee, but I could not. After all, she was just a harmless old woman. Besides, I wanted to confront her about last night. I began towards her, calmly. But as I drew closer, a strange fear began to envelop me. Her solemn face relaxed, and she smiled. A smile that could mean anything. Now it seemed like victory, a malevolent kind. All my bravado was melting. I was ready to flee at the first sign of danger. Yards before her, I stopped. Her smile now showed a set of decayed teeth. I stared at her, not knowing what to say. "Do not go to the Halikandar, Anish. There is only evil there," she blurted, then grew silent as if contemplating on something. Chapter 5, page 27. I waited for a few moments, then decided to terminate the encounter, as she was spooking me. Turning around, I briskly walked towards the main road. "Wait, Anish," I heard her call sweetly, but I continued walking till I reached the road. I hailed a rickshaw and got in. When I turned behind, she was squatting on the ground, watching me angrily. Slowly, she raised a finger and wagged it at me. It could be anything, a threat or a warning. I shivered inwardly. I was surprised with myself for being rattled so easily. My next stop was our lawyer, Yash's house. After all, he was my dad's trusted confidant, like Chandru. To my surprise, his attitude towards me was ice cold. Before I could utter a word about Salim or Girish, he spoke nonstop. "I will hand all your property papers to you on your 21st birthday in the presence of Chandra. The transfer will happen then and there. But a couple of days back, you phoned Uncle saying some papers are lost." I interrupted. He rubbished it, declaring that he hadn't spoken to Uncle for over 2 months. Who was lying? My old coot or the bloody liar lawyer? Now to Holly Kandar wasn't my priority. Chapter 5, page 28. Within minutes, my rickshaw was speeding to Salim's house. No one was there. The door was locked. It wore a deserted look. There was no sign of a living soul. It seemed to be abandoned. As I moved around, I could not help feeling I was being watched. I disregarded it. The encounter with the old woman had made me jittery, I reckoned. An unexplainable eeriness shot through me. I dashed to the road for a rickshaw. The corner of my eye caught something move at a distance. It was her again, squatting down, picking up something from the ground. And the frightening thing was she was exactly at the spot where I was standing a few moments ago. I have heard of people doing voodoo, using the victim's belongings. Was she doing that? Did I drop something? How did she reach here so fast? Then I remembered I had visited Yush Uncle before coming here. But yet I could not convince myself. How did she know I was coming here? Was she stalking me? I could think of nothing. Besides, there was still another unpleasant task to complete before night. Chapter 6, Desolate Dare, The Decapitated Head, page 29. Sunset was barely an hour away, but the sky was downcast. An hour before sunset, I was ready to set off. The schmuck now seemed apprehensive. "Do you want to do this, Anish Baba?" He asked me just before I could leave. I gave a freezing look, silencing him. He tied a sacred string on my wrist as protection. I also took the schmuck's cord and my dad's wind cheater as a good luck charm. The same wind cheater he wore on that fateful night. A good distance away were the ruins. I stopped. It stood silent, and a strange beckoning force seemed to emit from it that scared me. The infamous history of the ruins added to its horror. It now looked foreboding against the dark and gloomy skies. Lush green grass surrounded the black, stoned wall that rose majestically, but evilly. Fresh monsoon grass had taken root all over the wall, blending its green with the black. The complete atmosphere seemed to suit the occupant's lair. The entrance was large and yawning. Beyond it was a jumble of wild grass and stones. I stepped into the ruins. A gust of wind rushed behind me as if coaxing me in. Chapter 6, page 30. A mournful groan sounded, announcing my entry. The walls ran in an oblate shape. At the far end were dark niches. I was down to business, looking for the banyan tree. With a thudding heart, I began searching for the accursed tree. All of a sudden, my skin erupted with goosebumps. The wind felt cold against it. To add to my fear, I could feel myself being followed. Try as much, I could not bring myself to turn around. What was I going to do? Turn around and vamoose out of here. But a certain pride would not allow me to turn tail. I had to prove myself. Tie the string and vamoose out of here, shithead. A voice propelled from within. Just a little more, it called again. Foolishly, I heeded to it. I kept reminding myself it was dusk, not night. As if in answer, the sky became ominously dark and a faint drizzle hit the earth. I took no shelter in my wind cheater. I was oblivious to it. I trudged on and on. Every moment I expected the ancient undead to appear out of those niches. Every sort of creature seen in horror films, I imagined. Chapter 6, page 31. The cold wind passing my ears seemed to whisper evil incantations. Suddenly, I heard a tinkle, a soft metallic sound in the thick grass. I stopped and listened. Moments later, I heard another. Fear froze me. Stories of the witch appearing in the ruins on the Amavaja night, the Black Night, came to mind. They said she used to play and run around in the company of her vampires. Her screeching laughter and the tinkling of her piles. Anklets could be heard. My nerves collapsed. I turned around. Instantly, I knew I was doomed. Standing near a clearing was the witch woman. She just stood there watching me, her wide, coal-lined eyes furious. Her long salt and pepper-colored hair streaming down the sides of her head. Her sudden appearance caused my body to grow completely immobile. Terror filled my being. I was never so frightened in my life. For moments, we stood there watching each other. Slowly, she lifted a hand and pointed a withered digit at me. Anish, I have told you never to come here. Now I have to warn you about. Her voice released my immobile body. I dropped my wind cheater, turned around, and ran blindly, not realizing I was going deeper into the Kandar. Chapter 6, page 32. Anish, her voice trailed behind me. I continued this blind run. God only knows for how long. Minutes later, I was completely winded. I could run no longer. I stopped, doubled over, trying to get back my breath. I was relieved she had not bothered to follow me. Or had she? She was nowhere to be seen. Only then I realized I had dropped my dad's wind cheater in blind haste. I terribly regretted having lost it. There was not an ounce of courage to go back and retrieve it. Just then, I heard a sound behind me. I turned around, only to see the grasses on the shadowy ground parting. I stared in horror at the sight below me, unable to move. Salim's head appeared from under the ground amidst the parted grasses. The decapitated head soiled with mud was watching me, wide-eyed. With a scream, I spun around and raced to the entrance. The rain came down in sheets, drenching me to the skin. I ran wildly, half running, half stumbling out of the ruins. Heading towards the village, there I dropped to the ground, breathless, feeling safe among humans. I gagged and coughed on my breath, wondering how narrowly I had escaped. I had seen Salim's fucking ghost. I kept repeating to myself. Chapter 7. Desolate Dare. The Jigsaw Solved. Page 33. A pair of shoes suddenly appeared near me. I jerked in fear and looked up. Uncle Chandra, thank God. I hugged him tightly. I had never been so relieved in my life. I was trembling and sobbing uncontrollably. So, what if he had lied to me? At least he was human. What is it, Anish? What? Asked Uncle, alarmed. I continued to hold him tightly and repeat. Uncle, I have seen the dead Salim. I have seen the dead Salim. Also the witch. What rubbish, said Uncle. He is dead weeks ago. And what witch are you talking about? No, uncle. I have seen him as frigging ghost, I said between sobs. Where? Where Unish? He asked. In the Tahali Kandar, I said. Didn't I tell you not to go there? He rebuked. Sorry, but you have to believe me, please, I begged. Seeing me shaking uncontrollably, Uncle put an arm around me. Let's get away from this rain and have some hot drink. He guided me to a roadside tea shop, a simple shelter of tin and asbestos. We drank hot tea and ate vadas. I was beginning to feel good. Now, young man, let's hear your story. About Salim's ghost, he said. Chapter 7, page 34. Cut the abuses. Uncle munched on the vadas and interrupted. I was in a damn state of stress and truthfully told him the whole story word to word. Even the eavesdropping episode. Abruptly, I stopped speaking. My eyes were at the doorway, wide with terror. My hands started trembling, spilling tea on the table. Standing at the door was Salim, grinning from ear to ear, waving his hand at me. Salim, at the door. I choked. Uncle turned and watched the door. Then he turned back to me. Where? Donkey where? There is no one at the door. I looked at Uncle as if he was insane. Salim was standing there all the time, grinning at me. Was Salim's ghost only visible to me? I glanced back at Uncle in utter disbelief. He continued merrily munching on the vadas and suddenly burst out laughing. He turned around and called, Yeda Salim, come join us. Unish, he's called Yeda for his crazy acts. Now you should get this title. After Yeda Salim joined us, Uncle told him my story. The two had a belly full of laughs as I sat there like a hunchback. Uncle Chandra hoped you have a good explanation. Chapter 7, page 35. After a severe reprimanding, Uncle explained, Tahali Kandar has now been granted heritage status but had plenty of swamps. Volunteers from far and wide have registered to do a cleanup job. Salim and Girish were bitten, but not by a vampire or a witch, but by mosquitoes. Mosquitoes breed amply in marshes. It is not this Yeda Salim who had died of malaria. It was another Salim, Salim Mudassar, a case of mistaken identity. Salim Mudassar and Girish had gone there to help clean up. Of course, our Girish too got infected with what seems like malaria, but is recovering rapidly. Well, about me entering the lair and killing them. I was planning to take an army of volunteers and disinfect the entire Kandar for good. But Uncle, I overheard you tell someone over the phone that Girish had been suffering from bouts of fright fevers. Surely he was extremely scared of, I trailed. I didn't say Girish has been suffering from bouts of fright fevers, but had said he has been suffering from bouts of night fevers. Malarial victims shiver, especially after sunset. I was speaking to our village headman. Chapter 7, page 36. But Uncle, you lied about the missing papers and Girish's dad lied to me about Girish. I insisted. Yeah, as soon as you left Girish's house, his dad phoned me and spoke of your visit. You see, Unish, besides malaria, Girish also showed signs of H1N1 sickness commonly known as swine flu. On the outbreak of malaria and swine flu, the headman, Girish's dad, Yash and I decided to keep the matter strictly to ourselves. If these simple villagers would get even a whiff of the matter, panic would break out. Surely, our fickle government would have snatched away the status even before it was officially conferred on Tahali Kandar. Also, we only assumed that Giri had swine flu. Until our doubts were confirmed, we had to quarantine him. And about not telling you, we know how oversmart you are. I ignored Uncle's jibe and asked, and the old witch woman? She is no old witch woman. She is just an afflicted woman who had lost her son ages ago in the Tahali Kandar. Since then, she wanders in the ruins hoping to find her son. It was this senile witch woman who came a while ago in the heavy rain. Told me you were screaming and running into Tahali Kandar like you had lost your marbles. Otherwise, how would I know your whereabouts? She also returned your dad's wind cheater. You had dropped at the Kandar. Chapter 7, page 37. Then, with utmost respect, he handed me the wind cheater and murmured, History repeats itself. History repeats itself? I did not know what these words meant, but accepted the wind cheater. I now felt a sense of gratitude for Maltabai. Relief. Suddenly, I realized Uncle was up to old tricks again. How could an old woman rush back to our house to inform Chandru about me? Somebody was keeping tabs on me. The lying coot Chandru. But last night, Uncle, why did you deny seeing Maltabai peeping at the window? Because, Anish, last night there wasn't anyone near the window. I waited for a few moments for Uncle to laugh and say it was a joke. But nothing of that happened. He was talking to Salim, but I was sure I had seen Maltabai. Speak up, man. Hearing their conversation, I realized Salim used to go artifact hunting in and around Tahali Kandar. He had dug a ditch 5 feet deep, so when he stood in it, his head came up to the ground. He had heard my footsteps and stood up to investigate, and so it seemed Salim's head appeared from amidst the grasses. I could not help laughing at myself. Chapter 8. Desolate Dare, The Ugly Truth, page 38. Uncle Chandra knew I had learned my lesson. After Salim left, I pushed my luck once more. Uncle, what happened to Dad? How did he die? The question instantly put an end to all the fun. Anish, he sighed. Today I will tell what you always wanted to know about Arjun's death. I usually hate to talk about it. Today you will also understand why I did not want you to go to the Tahali Kandar, moreover for a stupid dare. Uncle grew silent, as if he was reliving the time. I could feel the pain he was undergoing. Slowly he began. Many years ago, on that fateful night, Arjun and I had gone to the Tahali Kandar as a dare. It was a dare between us. Also, let me add, it was the most foolish thing of our life. But being young and errant back then, we did it. We were to enter the Tahali Kandar from either side of the ruins at the dead of night, and meet at the highest point on the fort wall, facing the sea. Uncle stopped again. He was reaching the terrible part. Chapter 8, page 39. He took a slow, deep breath and began. All went well, and we met at our rendezvous. We were standing there on the fort wall, relaxing, congratulating, and back-slapping each other. All the while, we were watching the surf crash against the rocks way down at the foot of the fort wall. The adrenaline was still surging through our veins. Suddenly, Maltabai appeared out of nowhere. So sudden was her appearance that both of us were startled. Before I knew, I stumbled backwards over the low parapet of the fort wall. In sheer reflex, I grabbed onto Arjun, and the two of us fell onto the treacherous rocks below. Once again, Uncle stopped. His eyes glistened with tears. I fell on the rocks and blacked out. I got a few stitches on my head and sprained an arm and leg. Arjun was washed into the sea. After a few hours, he was found, badly battered. He had sustained very serious injuries on his head, ribs, and arm, and battling the open seas had worsened his condition. Infection had set in the wounds. Arjun knew his end was near. We all three knew it was an accident and vowed to keep it a secret, or else the villagers would lynch an innocent lady as a witch. Chapter 8, page 40. After all, she too had lost her son in the Kandar, the same place where Arjun had fallen. Her son, too, was washed away in the sea. Only his body was never recovered. He was on a dare too. At that moment, strangely, I was not feeling so much for Dad as much I was feeling for Uncle. I could understand the guilt Uncle was living with. I hugged him, and the two of us wept. How many times today had Maltabai met you, Anish? For bloody times, damn that witch woman. I had to direct my anger at someone. I had lost my father for no fault of his. No, Anish, don't curse her. Maltabai felt guilty for the accident and tried to tell you. That's why she followed you all day. Don't forget, she alerted me. You were lost in the ruins today. Don't forget that bloody old bitch killed Dad. I retorted. Anish, remember, Arjun held nothing against her. Big deal. I exploded. Maybe it was a mistake telling you the truth. He sighed. Chapter 8, page 41. I angrily stood up and walked to the window. Uncle's advocating for her was pissing me off. Outside, the thunder and lightning were wreaking havoc in the dark skies. It mirrored the inside of me. Uncle approached me. Uncle, why the hell do you keep supporting her? I exploded in his face. Have you got a soft spot for her? I was near to tears. Angry tears. His silence told me there was something. I quelled my anger. As he waited, he appeared somewhat at a discomfort. Anish. His lips quivered before he could speak. Anish. There is a thing I have to tell you, also show you some papers. But this is not the right place. Then where else? I asked. A lump of anxiety was forming in my throat. Was Uncle trying to weasel away my inheritance? Let's go home, he said and walked out. All the way home, I could not keep my rising anxiety down. All thoughts of the evening occurrences were pushed back. Back home, Uncle took me to his den and sat me down. But I was surprised when he asked me, "Care for a cigarette or maybe a beer?" Chapter 8, page 42. I looked at Uncle dumbfounded. "What's up, dude? Don't give me that look," he stated in a matter-of-fact tone. "Don't you think I'm not aware of your so-called extracurricular activities?" I instantly colored. I sat tongue-tied, waiting for the next thunderbolt. Uncle got out a cigarette pack and offered me one. I quickly declined. It had been years since I had seen him smoke. He pushed a glass of drink in my hand. "Relax, son. It's just like Coke." Surprised with Uncle's pushiness, I eyed the drink suspiciously. "Don't worry, Arjun would have done the same. And within a few days, you will be a certified adult. So drink up." "Oh yeah, so now what am I, a kid?" I reluctantly sipped the drink. It was syrupy and spicy. The stuff ignited my throat. "What is this brew?" I complained. "This is India's version of tequila, boy, brewed from spices." I wished Uncle would end his shenanigans and come out with it. The shame of being caught was wearing off. Now it was being replaced with indignation. How dare Uncle spy on me? Chapter 8, page 43. Uncle lit a cigarette and took a deep puff. For a moment, I felt like joining him. Exhaling the smoke, he looked at me. I braced myself for yet another revelation. "Maltabai is the mother of my child, my son." He dropped a thunderbolt. "Aw shit. Loony Vishy." I swore inwardly. After all, the boy was a bastard. I immediately felt pity for Vishy and Aunt. This explained why the boy was always aloof and shy. He probably had somehow sensed it. Uncle stopped and looked at me. He had a look of pain. I felt pity. I reached over and grasped his palm. He too grasped it as if drawing strength. "Does Vishy know about it?" I felt compelled to speak. "No," Uncle answered. "And Aunt?" I continued. "No, only Arjun knew about it. I am going to reveal it to you, because I believe you are mature enough to understand." I felt sick. Suddenly, the pitiful face of Vishy appeared before me. I was not sure I wanted to hear it. Uncle took another deep breath. Before beginning, it was those days when Maltabai was young and worked as a maid in my house. In due course, one thing led to another, and soon Maltabai was pregnant with my child. Chapter 8, page 44. I swore under my breath. Another illegitimate love story. It was none of my goddamn business whom he slept with. She did not disclose this to me till the baby bump was showing. I was petrified. I flatly denied accepting the truth. If the news went out, I wouldn't be able to face the world. She was of a lower caste while I was of a higher one. I ranted mercilessly at her. It was the most pathetic act of cowardice in my life. Uncle stopped as if reliving the moment, and then started again. My mind could not help going back to Vishy. From now on, I would befriend him. Later my conscience pricked me, continued Uncle. I relented a little. I met her father and explained the delicate situation to him. Before the villagers discovered, I convinced him to send her to the city with me to abort the child. I was playing the Good Samaritan. Even then, I did not confess. Uncle stopped. I could read the remorse in his eyes. Her helpless father agreed. He had no choice, began Uncle. An unwed mother is a shame to the village. Poor Maltabai abided by my decision without a murmur. Chapter 8, page 46. I felt as helpless as her. In the city, she gave birth to our child. On returning, I arranged her marriage. Within a year or two, she had a son, but misfortune struck her. Her husband died shortly. 10 years later, her son disappeared in the ruins. Even after a thorough search, he could not be found. Naturally, she lost her mental balance. He was on a dare too. And Vishy? Does he know the truth? I interrupted. Uncle looked at me for a moment before continuing. Vishy knowing this is hardly important. Unable to bear any children, Arjun adopted Maltabai's child. Just for a moment, Uncle paused. Realization then hit me with the force of a million-volt shock. "Oh my God!" I cried. "So, you mean to say you are my biological father and that Maltabai is my mother?" Uncle's gentle nod confirmed my presumption. I looked at him shocked. It was as if he had cracked a vulgar joke. Imagine a Kamwali by domestic maid, my mother, and a son of a mere foot soldier, my father. I did not know what to do. I paced around a couple of times, agitated. In a moment, I realized all my doubts about Uncle were coming true. Chapter 8, page 47. Uncle was trying to weasel me out of my inheritance. A fury whipped through my being. How low could a man fall? Why the backstabbing, conniving pig, claiming to be my father, trying to tarnish my royal lineage? And at what price? For a little bit of land? Where were all his high ideals? Instantly, all my respect for him dropped. I looked at Uncle straight in his eye. "What is it, Chandra? Want to hog my inheritance?" I punctuated it with an ugly laugh. He looked at me aggrieved. "Mr. Chandra Amra, don't give me that innocent sorry look. Am I not aware of your so-called extracurricular activities?" I imitated him. I paced some more and turned to him. "Listen, son," Uncle began. "Don't call me son." I interrupted. "I am not your son, Chandru." I spat, a sardonic smile on my face. "Don't think you can grab my property. I will do a DNA test." "Okay, fine. Anish, just read this note before anything else," said Uncle. My hands trembled as I held the old, crinkly paper. I opened it and instantly recognized my father's handwriting. The handwriting I had always admired in his journals. Slowly, I began reading. Chapter 8, page 48. "Dear Anish, if you are reading this letter, it means 3 things have happened. First, you have come of age. Second, Chandra has told you all the facts. Third, I am no longer alive." It was like Dad, direct and blunt. I smiled despite tears brimming. "Son, I am really sorry to tell you I am not your father. But it does not mean I never regarded you as a son." Reading those words brought tears to me. I pressed my eyes tightly to prevent them from rolling down. I went back to reading the letter, but I knew the next sentence would sever the last of the ties with Dad. And I was right. "You are the son of Chandra and Malti." The words felt like being socked in the gut. I calmed down and continued to read. Chapter 8, page 49. "Believe me, Chandra, your father, is the most honorable man I have ever known. He has probably taken the complete blame of disowning you. But trust me, he was ready to bear the consequences the moment you were born. It was I who persuaded him not to do any of his foolish bravados. It would devastate his family. I took the responsibility of looking after you. But I guess fate had stored something else for us. So, son, trust him with your life. I have nothing more to tell you. Besides, writing can be a pain. God bless you. Just remember what I have said. P.S. I bear no malice against Malti for the accident on the fort. Regards, your dad, Arjun Gaikwad." I folded the letter, placed it on the table, and turned away. I was an unwanted child. The bitter truth sunk in me. I felt unclean. The atmosphere inside the room was suffocating. I stalked out of the place. The rain had grown steady. I stood in it drenching myself, trying to cleanse my unclean feeling. Minutes passed till I heard someone call my name. I knew who it was. Chapter 8, page 50. "Anish," he called once again. I forced myself to turn. There stood a man before me, with the most regrettable look on his face. He had sensed the turmoil upsurging in me, and he knew he was to be blamed. Today, he was a complete stranger. All the years of familiarity had died within minutes. What should I call him? Dad or uncle? Confusion arose in me. The familiar stranger put an arm around my shoulder. I was tempted to shrug it off, though it felt comforting. I let it stay. After all, we were bloodlines. "Forget the past," began the familiar stranger. "I will do anything you want, and then we can start a new life. And your inheritance is intact. Not a paisa is less." I turned to the stranger angrily, but all I saw was pain and tears in his eyes. I could not hold back myself. I flung myself on him and embraced him tightly. "I want to see Mother now," I bawled out like a child. "Yes, we shall go now," he answered back, hugging me tightly. A huge load is off my shoulders. Chapter 8, Page 51. I relented. For the first time, I too put my arm around his shoulder. Like best buddies, we started from Maltabai's house, my ma. Now I realize why she followed me all the time. She, being my mother, damn it, wanted to talk to me. And all this time, I had ignored her. I had been one sordid prick. All my pretenses had been stripped away within a moment. I felt lower than Vichy. Even Mohan was much better than me. It was I who was the bastard. Chapter 9. Desolate Dare. Truth is stranger than fiction. Page 51. While walking, soaking in the pouring rain, we found ourselves facing an approaching funeral procession. We respectfully moved aside, and Uncle inquired about the deceased person. Maltabai, came the reply. Uncle and I peered through the crowd and saw her sallow face. A wave of remorse and sorrow hit us. When did she die? Uncle further inquired. Yesterday evening, Sahib. Some of the mourners stopped and answered. Yesterday or today? Uncle demanded loudly in the otherwise mournful air. Chapter 9. Page 52. Yesterday, around 3 in the evening. Our hospital's report has confirmed the time of death. They answered almost in unison. Uncle and I looked at each other. Blanking out the world around us, a flurry of thoughts ran through our mind. We felt our bodies slump to the slushy road, stunned. Sahib, are you all right? Concerned voices around us asked. Do you want some help? We continued to stare at the funeral procession as it proceeded towards the crematorium. The downpour grew heavy, cutting down all visibility. But images in our minds were crystal clear.